the writer-director, Emilio Estavez, and the star of the movie, Mr. Martin Sheen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much. We'd like to begin the Q&A by asking if there are any members of the audience that have done the Camino. Are there any Pellegrinos here? One. Uno, dos. Over here, three. And in the back, two. Well, buen Camino. We hope that you relived your experience and that we provided something that you could tell your friends, yeah, that's what I was doing those 2 months that I was off. It's a very sensitive mic.
I'm still giving him directions.
Should we start with questions? Do you guys have any questions? Please, right here.
When writing the film, Emilio, did you always have the intention of casting your father as Tom when you wrote it?
Sure. No, I wrote it for him. It was on his insistence that I write it for him. That I write it, period. You know, I live right down the street from my folks, about 200 yards. If you're a good golfer, it's about a one wood. And it has its advantages and disadvantages. When you're working essentially for him, it makes it very convenient for him to come over and I have an idea. I have another idea. I know you're in there. There's no hiding. But no, I always intended on writing this for him. I wasn't going to make the film without him. And I knew that I could also get him very cheaply.
This way I don't have to answer.
I'd like to start with a statement, and I hope I can sound sincere as I say it. Unfortunately, I think today a lot of films, a lot of movies are movies, and they don't really take advantage. They're just a long TV show. This is truly a story, and I have to say that it was quite amazing to come to a theater and witness the story. Now my question, which might be a hard one. Generally, artists, and I view you as that, they tell a story because it's a piece of their soul, a bit that they want to share with the world. Why this story, and why did you want to share it with us?
Firstly, you know, my grandfather, Francisco, my father's father, is from Galicia, which is about, he comes from a town about 80 kilometers from Santiago de Compostela. So I'm very much a Gallego, a Galician in my heart. I feel very, very connected to Spain. But 8.5 years ago, 2003, my father went to Spain to check out the Camino. He was in between seasons of 3 and 4 on the West Wing. He always had a desire to go there. So my son was working with him as his assistant on the show, and was sort of forced to go along with. So off they went, woefully unprepared. They had no backpack, no walking stick, no proper shoes, no sense. And so they went off to Spain to check out the Camino. They ended up in a town called Burgos, which is the town where the gypsy boy steals the backpack, and stopped at like a bed and breakfast that takes in the pilgrims. They sat down for the pilgrim supper, and this beautiful young lady named Julia walked into the room. She was the innkeeper's daughter. My son took a look at her, fell madly in love, came home and announced that he was going to move to Spain. He's been there for 8.5 years. He married her. So I started thinking, man, if I want to see my son, I better figure out how to work in Spain. But in all seriousness, my mother has always been telling me, you know, to write and make films about what I know something about. I know about family. I know about community. I know a little bit about faith. And I know about losing a son on the Camino de Santiago. Now, not tragically, of course. So this was a very personal story for me, and a personal one for my father as well.
Quick question. How did your father
elder take to your direction. I wonder what the dynamic is like when you're working together, the elder, the younger.
Next question.
It was a joy to work with this gentleman. He's an extraordinary actor. I've directed him now 3 times. Each time has been a privilege. It's not always easy. He is very, very gregarious, and he jumps into a crowd, and he wants to know everybody where they're from. He wants to take pictures and make sure there's a backup. So it's how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. How you doing? Hey, let's picture it. And David and I are standing there going, we're never going to get shot. But it's just never going to happen. We're watching the sun go down, and he's taking more photos. I had to keep reminding him that he was not, that Tom was not that guy. That Tom was not gregarious. Tom was not a citizen of the world. Tom was not connected to his humanity. He will be. He will be fully awake by the end of the film, but at this point, he cannot be. Otherwise, there's no evolution of the character. So that was really the biggest challenge, I think, we had working together, was just reminding him that we had a long way to go, 800 kilometers, and the character will evolve during that time.
And now I guess my question is, how do I turn this from a passion into a career? Because, I mean, I have the agent, I'm doing the struggling actor thing, I'm doing the writer. What's the next step?
You have an agent?
I do.
Why? It's your first mistake, right? They just, when we were pitching this back in LA, even our own agents, we'd tell them the story and he'd watch their eyes glaze over and they'd say, wait a minute, there's no CGI, there's no nudity, there's no vulgarity, and doesn't a spaceship land in Santiago? Can't you? I don't understand. Their walk? Wait a minute, can't they be on motorcycles? Are you telling your story? I think you have to ask yourself the question. And to the earlier question that we addressed, the first couple of movies I made were dreadful. I wasn't telling my story, and I wasn't connecting to him personally. So the question for you is this something that the $50,000 that you spent, the movie that you made, does it represent who you are? Is it close to what you believe? I think so often young filmmakers try to emulate, try to copy, be you, tell your own journey. That's what's interesting to me. How's it being received?
We're just doing music now. We hired a composer, a friend
So you're
of
still
mine.
in post?
We're still in post. It's been well received. It's something I find personal. It's about growing up and trying to figure out what you want to do after university and trying to figure out a career. And it's just a group of friends struggling to do that. Something I wanted to tell.
Right on. Bravo, man. Really, congratulations.
Stay at it.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Next question.
How long did the shooting take, and what was the toughest scene to shoot?
Well, we had 40 days on the Camino. Everything was shot in Spain. Even some of the California moments were shot in Spain. We wanted to shoot in sequence for a number of reasons. Most, not the least of which is just the geography. So the whole thing was challenging, in truth. I mean, we shot the film in September. It was it's the rainy season in the north of Spain. We were warned that it was going to rain every day. We were blessed. It rained 2 days, and those 2 days we had scheduled interior. So we had very good fortune. I would have to say that the river scene, not surprisingly, was the trickiest scene. Not because we were so worried about Martin, because he's a stud and he can handle it, but because Martin's wife was staring at me and she said, "I'm not worried about those two. If anything happens to Martin, you're in trouble." So no. I mean, there were a number of challenges. We tell this story about how we didn't get permission to film in the cathedral until 48 hours before we were shooting there. We were really very nervous about that, as you can imagine. It's such an important ending, and then what a wonderful gift they had given us, because no one had ever filmed in the cathedral before. They had done a short documentary. There was a bit of news footage, but no one has ever taken a film crew in there, and they trusted us. And in the end, they were quite pleased with what it was. But it was all very challenging. But I'm pleased we got to the end. Next.
I thought the other 3 characters were well defined and interesting. were they based on people who actually you met along the way, or people that you know have come across?
The question was, were the other three characters were people we knew along the way or people we came across? Obviously, I wrote the role for Martin. I was in the middle of putting the script together, the early stages, and I met Deborah Kara Unger, a fellow countryman, to you guys, a wonderful Canadian actress who we just started a dialogue, and I said, I think you'd be very interesting in this film. So I began to write the role around her character, around her, you know, just her vibe.
She didn't say she was sorry once, did she? She was a crusty Canadian. We love her. She wasn't apologetic, was she? She was fantastic.
The Dutchman is a guy that came out of my life, a fellow winemaker, one of those bon vivants, a guy that, you know, just comes up with one-liners endlessly, gets hammered, smokes a ton of pot. I mean, he's just one of those guys that you just can't help but laugh when you're around him. And he would say things like, if it ain't Dutch, it ain't much. And I'd say, and I'd go off and I'd write it down, I'll use that someday. And Jimmy's character, the Jack, the writer, was inspired by Jack Hitt. He's a contributing writer for Mother Jones. He wrote a terrific book called Off the Road. And his voice, I thought, was important to include. He's definitely agnostic, or if not atheist. He's got some issues with the church. He's got some issues with religion in general. And he provides, I think, a very interesting, very contrarian voice to the other three characters in the film. So those were the inspirations for the four.
How much walking did you actually get done in the 40 days, and do you hope sometime to ever do the entire journey yourselves?
You mean without cameras or catering?
Yes.
Impossible, how dare you? We were out there for 40 days. We started, as David said, in Saint-Jean, and 40 days later we were in Muxia.